Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. Science fiction is about the unknown. It's full of unexplored ideas, worlds, universes, and dimensions. It's for individuals who might find their current existence to be a tad bit ordinary and boring, which is why oftentimes the society and culture we see in science fiction is far from normal and far from stable. The characters we see populate these stories are rarely boring and usually full of extremes in emotions and beliefs. And it's not just the characters that are unhinged and extreme. Society itself is oftentimes teetering on the edge of collapse and dystopian nightmare. And it's in these most chaotic moments that we find our greatest heroes and most courageous warriors, which is why today I want to take a look at 8 of the best lawmen in the sci-fi genre. While exploring the ruins of post-apocalyptic Boston in 2287, one of the first people you meet after stepping out of your vault is a man named Preston Garvey. Preston isn't really a lawman or even a cop. He's a part of an informal volunteer defense militia known as the Minutemen. Inspired by the revolutionary militias during the War of Independence, the Minutemen tried their best to keep the settlers in the Commonwealth area safe from mutants, monsters, and bandits. Preston had joined the Minutemen under the command of Colonel Hollis at the age of 17 and was thoroughly dedicated to the cause. In 2287, the bulk of the Minuteman force responded to a call for help from the settlement of Quincy, which was being besieged by the mercenary group known as the Gunners. The Minutemen managed to break through the Gunner siege lines and reinforce the town, but they were ultimately overrun by the Gunners in the ensuing battle. Preston Garvey had been able to gather a handful of civilians and escape the massacre, and had been moving town to town ever since the Quincy incident. He was trying his best to keep all of the civilians underneath his protection safe. While Preston Garvey annoyed a lot of people who played Fallout 4, I found his earnest and optimistic outlook in life refreshing amidst the ruins of this nuclear holocaust. While his fighting skills and leadership abilities were definitely not the best, it was Preston's ability to never give up and his willingness to help others that made him an excellent lawman. Ever since the First Contact War, I've not been fans of Turians. There's something just wrong about having your bones on the outside of your body. But Garros seemed like an alright type of guy. He had proven to be not only a protector of the Turians, but also a protector of all life in Galaxy, which is not only totally cool, but it's also very woke. Like all Turians, Garros started his military training at the age of 15. He would follow his father's footsteps and join CSEC, or Citadel Security Services, the police force that maintains the peace on the massive space station known as the Citadel. The Citadel serves as the UN of the known galaxy. Representatives from all of the major alien species have offices and missions on this station. Garros eventually makes it to the investigation division of CSEC and proves to be quite capable. His biggest job comes when a Spectre, which is a special operative for the Citadel High Council, goes rogue. The Spectre is a Turian named Saren, and he's completely lost his mind to an ancient alien race bent on destroying the entire galaxy. It's a very sensitive case because ultimately the Spectres are supposed to be the hands and eyes of the Citadel Council, and having one of these agents become corrupted would be a huge deal and very embarrassing for the Council. And because Saren was a Turian, this would also be embarrassing for the Turian species as well. And so Garros continuously faces hurdles in his investigation and ultimately decides to leave CSEC so he can pursue the case without having his hands tied behind his back. Garros' loyalty to solving the case on behalf of all life in the galaxy is very admirable. He's not looking to just protect CSEC or the Council or his own species. Usually disgraced cops become bounty hunters and not the other way around. But in the Blade Runner universe, bounty hunters become specialist plainclothes police officers hired specifically by the San Francisco Police Department in order to retire escaped androids known as Replicants. Replicants were mainly used in off-world colonies where they would extract resources or manufacture goods in pretty dangerous conditions. Replicants were a lot physically tougher than your average human being. Rick Deckard was one of these bounty hunters, also known as Blade Runners. Initially, he had seen replicants as just objects to retire. He eventually develops empathy for them, especially after falling in love with one. Not the most professional thing to do, but again, it's important for police officers to have empathy for the populations they are patrolling. Lawmen are supposed to live within the communities that they patrol every day. This way they better understand the needs of the people they're trying to serve. Unlike soldiers, lawmen are supposed to de-escalate the situation whenever possible and save lives, even the creepy lives of replicants. Future Detroit is a terrible place, so bad that the police are oftentimes overpowered by gangs. Which is exactly what happens to patrolman Alex J. Murphy. On a routine armed robbery call, he and his partner are ambushed by a gang, and Alex is tortured and brutally dismembered limb by limb with gunfire. Murphy's story should have ended in the ER, but he had signed a waiver that allowed Omni Consumer Products to do whatever it wanted with his body. OCP was a mega corporation, and they actually ran the police and many other services usually run by the government in Detroit. The OCP ends up using the remains of Alex Murphy, who at this point is clinically dead, to create a cyborg known as Crime Prevention Unit 001, or Robocop. Robocop was essentially a perfect mix between man and machine. He had perfect aim, heightened response times, and a variety of different tools and weapons slotted into his armored body. The only thing that the OCP didn't plan for was that Murphy would actually regain some of his former memories and personality. And it turns out the human side of Murphy is exactly what would make him an excellent police officer and protect him from turning into a giant killer robot that's just a slave to his programming. While not traditional peacekeepers, the agents in the Matrix franchise fulfill a very similar role to a police officer. They are programs designed to protect the computer-generated world from viruses or other hostile entities. Because let's be honest, with the world in the darkened and destroyed state it was in, humans were probably better off being blue-pilled rather than red-pilled. Zion looks really sweaty, and that steak still very much tastes like steak. The agents also help maintain the integrity of the infrastructure and seek out programs that have gone rogue or are no longer capable of their job. Agents are impersonal, generic, and interchangeable like some large, shapeless mass, which might be exactly what you need to truly keep the peace in such a chaotic world. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Newton's third law of motion can be applied to many things, not just physics, but also the real world. A tougher and more heavily armed society requires a tougher and more heavily armed police force, and Judge Dredd Mega City 1 is a massive, sprawling wasteland that covers most of the east coast of the United States. Extreme urbanization, loss of habitable land due to war and population, and a general lack of resources have made the people of Mega City 1 batshit crazy, and Americans are more heavily armed than ever. Mega City 1 faces a huge supply and demand problem when it comes to policing. We're not given the ratio of how many civilians one judge is responsible for, but I'm sure it's very embarrassing. Which is why the judges are some of the best armed individuals on the street. Not only are they covered head to toe in armor, they also have extremely advanced sidearms that can be programmed to fire a variety of different munitions. Judge Dredd is one of the most famous street judges thanks to his tenacity and combat abilities, and perhaps most importantly, his ability to keep his cool and think while under heavy fire. Judge Dredd isn't just a peacekeeper, he's a soldier on the front lines protecting civilization from anarchy. On the flip side, when society becomes more enlightened and peaceful, so will our peacekeeping officers. In the Demolition Man universe, the future is a dystopian PC nightmare. People don't curse, eat junk food, or even have intimate physical relations. Violent crimes rarely ever happen. And homicides are even more rare, which is why police officers in the future LAPD don't even have sidearms. When the 90s era terrorist Simon Phoenix escapes out of a cryopenitentiary, the future cops of Los Angeles are completely overwhelmed by his violent behavior. And things get even more complicated when Simon breaks into a museum and seizes some of the only firearms left in all of California. The LAPD has no choice but to revive former LAPD officer Sergeant John Spartan from the California cryopenitentiary as well. He had been locked up over some nonsense collateral damage charges while pursuing Simon Phoenix in the 90s, and now he was the future LAPD's only hope in finding and stopping Simon Phoenix. John Spartan reminds us that policing doesn't always have to be reactive. Sometimes it pays to be prepared for extreme circumstances. Now, we've had a lot of gung-ho action hero types on this list, and in dystopian sci-fi worlds, that's a really good trait to have when you're a peacekeeping officer. But there's another archetype I like to talk about, and that is the detective. The majority of crimes happen without witnesses and police officers present. So one of the most important aspects of being a lawman is figuring out what's going on in the first place. In the TV series The Expanse, Detective Miller is a belter who watches over the citizens of Cersei Station, located deep in the asteroid belt. Miller had grown up on the station as an orphan and had turned to petty crime in order to survive. But somewhere along the line he changed sides and became a detective. His past experiences living on the station helped shape him into a very flexible cop. He realizes that his actions have consequences and that the heavily punitive measures of any law system oftentimes are blind to those consequences. Miller's focus instead is always on the results and solving the mystery at hand. Even though he's quite cynical and has a dark sense of humor, his priorities are always on the right side of morality. Detective Miller's loyalty is ultimately to the truth and to the people he cares about, and not necessarily the institutions he belongs to. When all of humanity faces their destruction in The Expanse, that's exactly the kind of guy you want on your side. So there are basically only two types of good lawmen in science fiction. You have your action hero badass who can take on an entire army by himself, and then you also have the individual with a very good moral compass who will always do the right thing no matter what and no matter how much of society seems to be against him. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie, and you are the protagonist.